Well, we come down to the Green Centre on Saturday morning and busy with lots of items here that you can look through. With me is George from the centre. We're talking about really following on from what Tynwald's been saying about going for this 15% renewables, and they want to hit this target by 2015. How's it looking?
It's not looking too good in that they're not making the sort of progress that you'd hope them to be making at this stage. There is still the possibility of doing it, but they're not really pushing as hard as we would like to see them pushing.
What would you like to see more done then?
Well, the most obvious use, because the requirement is 15% of electricity from renewables, and the most realistic method of generating electricity is by an onshore wind farm. That's the most cost-effective method, so we would expect them to be pushing hard for that if they were realistic about their 15-15 target.
We all know any planning takes time and can be contentious. I mean, an onshore wind farm would probably send a lot of people, mad if it was in their backyard sort of thing.
It's certainly the most contentious. There would be a group start-up. Arguably there already is, that would be against it. There is in all other areas where wind farms are planned.
Do you think it really is an option that's likely to be done then before 2015?
It could be, it's still possible, but it's getting less likely. It tends to take at least a year to get the planning because you have to do an environmental impact assessment. That takes a year just to do the wind monitoring and do the various measurements of bird life, animal life, whatever facilities there might be on that site. It just takes that length of time. Then you've got to go through the actual planning, and they'll have various questions to ask as well, no doubt. But it is possible, but we're reaching the limits of where it could happen now.
The waters have been muddied recently because it's been in the media last week. This other group, an engineering group, came out saying that wind farms is not the way to go forward at the moment. In fact, it could make things more difficult for the MEA because their machinery would have to power up and down and so on. What's your view on that?
Wind is another variable, but the whole electricity system is a variable. Ever since electricity ever started, all loads vary. If you think of your fridge at home, it turns on and off, you don't think about it, but the MEA see those changes in load. They get averaged out to an extent, but the load varies. They match their generation to make up with what load is there at the minute. A wind farm has another variable to add to that, but within reason it can be handled. So long as they're not actually generating more than 20% of the grid requirement, then they can handle that. More than that, they would need storage.
Well, another way forward is the solar panels on the roof. I have to declare an interest. I've actually done this myself recently. Of course, that brings its own problems, doesn't it?
It does, but it's a perfectly viable way to work, and it's also a way of reaching towards the 15-15 requirement. The UK realised this. They brought in feed-in tariffs, and they've got a massive amount of micro-generation, as it's referred to. That can be solar panels, which is probably the most commonly understood. Can be wind turbines, household-sized wind turbines. Can be hydro, can be biomass. The whole range are possible.
But on the Isle of Man, it's not the same feed-in tariffs, is it, as the UK? And there's a standing charge from MEA, which has been talked about in the papers a lot recently.
Certainly, the island doesn't have the same rules as the UK. I'm really using the UK's feed-in tariff as an example that microgeneration is a perfectly good way to work and does help towards the 15-15 commitment. To allow it to move further in the island, we would really need the MEA to be much more responsive in terms of helping to allow it. They have a number of negatives at the present time. When you want to consider micro-renewables, you have to get a network check done. That check now costs you £200 plus VAT, £240. That's a disincentive at the start. When they change the meter, they charge you another 200 plus VAT. So that's you've paid the MEA nearly £500 just to go ahead with it. Once you've actually gone ahead with it and you've installed your system, you've got it running, you then have to pay an extra £50 every year for your standing charge. So these are disincentives that really in this day and age shouldn't be there. No one else in the world seems to think renewables are a thing that should be.
But I mean, I know the government's turned around and said, yeah, there's a free plug-in point here. That's the car park, and you can plug your electric car in and get a free top-up. I mean, they'll say they're doing their bit.
They are doing their bit in many ways, and the net metering tariff is a good tariff. If they take away the extra standing charge and just have the same standing charge as everyone else, then that would be fair. Our charges are quite high over here at 16p a unit. That's in line with what the UK's feed-in tariff is likely to go towards for solar PV before too much longer. So we're not a long way away. We have some disadvantages compared to the feed-in tariff, but in the main it's not too far off the mark if they take away the standing charges and these other negative starting charges.